Hello, friends. Welcome back to Film Chewing. Today I am with Layla. We'll be discussing the 2024 film Civil War, directed by Alex Garland. And Layla, how are you doing?
Doing great. How are you?
I'm good. This is an interesting film, and you just mentioned you had a lot to say about it. So I'm curious to
Yeah.
hear your thoughts. So what are your general thoughts about it?
General thoughts overall, I liked it. I thought it was entertaining. I noticed some themes in it I thought were intriguing.
Mhm.
So I thought it was exciting and held my attention. Um, and I would say if there's one I wish had happened, I wish the characters had a little more depth to them because I felt like we were just, and maybe this was intentional, I felt like we were just seeing them in that moment and not so much sometimes understanding their motivations, you know.
Yeah, so it's interesting you bring up characters because I thought some of them were a little bit inconsistent because we did have Joel who, just as an example, Joel, who, they were in these like battlegrounds. They were watching people being executed. They were seeing people die right in front of them. The reporter, the journalists, they're reporting all these things. And then when their friends die later in the film, he has a really strong response to that. And I thought that seemed a little bit, I know they were trying to give the emotional impact of that death, but I just felt like if he's been in these situations, he's seen all these horrible things. It seemed a little strange about, his reaction seemed a little bit extreme. Well, I guess it's different when it's someone but still, these other scenes, he's kind of just like really casual when there's people being executed, just a few hundred feet away. So it seemed a little off.
Yeah, and I think you're touching on uh, something similar to what I was thinking
Mm-hmm.
in that it's like they were in this adrenaline bubble. There was like them and then everybody else. And maybe this was intentional where, we really didn't get into beyond knowing, I think, Texas and was it Texas, Florida, and California
Mm-hmm.
seceded? So we knew that happened. We really don't know why. So we knew there was a conflict, but it really wasn't invested so much in why there was a conflict. It was more, here's everybody else going crazy, and here are these folks, kind of, I mean, they're saying they want to document it, but I think they were enjoying it sometimes too. So, I mean, from that perspective, maybe they were the in group that thought they couldn't be touched, and then everybody else was like the out group, Um, and and you kind of saw that
Yes, yeah.
when Jesse joined them, Lee was so hostile to it because she felt like Jesse would be like a drag on them because she was so young. So it's like she hadn't proven herself, which I think was part of the story.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like she was moving from that out group that could be anybody into their inner circle. I don't know. You know.
That's a great point about them being observers, observing the conflict and not being a participant or not being kind of being, and they wear the vests, the press vests, and maybe
Yeah.
they felt like they were, don't want to say untouchable, but they felt like they were just observing and they weren't part of the conflict. They weren't affected by
Yeah.
it personally until that moment. So that makes sense.
They didn't even seem to like yeah, they didn't seem to care, I guess, who
Mhm.
was winning.
Yeah.
Um, and even when Joel goes into that shop and the girl was like, oh, all of that out there, we just don't think about that, you know? Um, and he was shocked because it was getting so crazy, but neither one of them still seem to be like, oh, my side is winning,
Hmm.
you know. Like the girl didn't seem to care at all. I think
Hmm.
she represented, sort of that middle that's always there,
Yeah.
when big political things happen. But yeah, so that's why I found it very interesting once I kind of got what was happening. Um,
Hmm.
because I think the timing made it seem like, oh, this might be a film about our current events, and our current issues. But it really wasn't. It was more about how it's more like a commentary on people becoming jaded, maybe, or not jaded, but like they just wanted the next big thing. They kept running to the next big thing and jumping into like these really dangerous situations to get a photo,
Yeah.
um, not to help or fight or
Yeah.
whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a, I was surprised how much this film focused on photojournalism and
Uh-huh.
um, journalism in general, but also I read reviews about this film, and there was a lot of people on both sides saying how the film was obviously on one side or another. I don't think they never took a side, and I think that was a good thing because when you take a side, you alienate half your audience, whether it's right or wrong. If you want to make a film like this, and you try and make it a point to frame it as one side or another being the aggressor or the people in the wrong, then it becomes more of a statement and not just kind of the situation you're in, which I thought was a smart thing to do because everybody can watch it and kind of you know gather their own thoughts. But I thought that they were very careful to not portray one side or another as wrong or you know you know as it. But I do think that the people who in the shop who were just like, oh, that's not my problem. I think that kind
Mm,
of represents, I think it was kind of how divided we are right now as a country with people on both sides. And then there's people, I think the majority who are in the middle who are just kind of
mm.
living their lives and oblivious to everything.
Yeah.
And just kind of like, well, I don't really know what's going on in politics. Not my, I'm just here running my dress shop. Like, you know,
Yeah. Yeah. And I go back and forth on which is a better place to be,
yeah,
because yeah.
yeah,
Um, but I
definitely.
I sort of felt like Joel was pro Washington or pro DC up until the last moment. I can't explain why. I felt like I noticed like concern when he was with the soldiers at the end and what are you going to do with him, the
Hmm.
president? And so I thought, okay, he's finally showing his hand. But then he gets up there and he's like, I just need a quote,
Yeah.
you know, and that part shocked me.
Yeah.
So I thought that was a good twist. I thought he was finally going to declare his allegiance, and he did. His allegiance was to the story.
Yeah.
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 So,
I guess, yeah, that was a little bit surprising because, I thought he would want more of a profound quote, but I guess in some ways, when you're reporting something that's, this big historical event that you're in the middle of, I guess that would go down
yeah.
in history as the president's last words. So
Yeah. So he got the scoop.
he got this, yeah, he got the scoop and he'll forever be remembered for it. Um, yeah.
One one question I have is why they focused on photojournalism. I'll have to say that that I started to notice the lack of video.
Yes.
And then I started to think, well, maybe that's intentional for the story. But what do you think? Do you think?
I thought that a lot, especially in the last, maybe the final third of the film, when they are, especially when they're raiding the White House. I thought, wouldn't this be much more impactful if they were if it was video, and especially
Right.
in our world when everyone has a phone on their a camera in their pocket,
Right.
it seems like almost contrary to what our current kind of cultural standard is now with everything being video. I thought it was interesting that they focus so much on photography. It almost seemed like a love letter to photojournalism and the history of photojournalism,
Yeah.
and less so kind of the I don't want to say instant gratification, but the photography is more of an art form,
Hmm.
and it was if it was video, I don't think that it would have the same impact, or it wouldn't have the story would be much different if it was video journalist, or if
Hmm.
they could carry a phone in with them and record it. It was intentional for them to have their tools, and they developed film, which I have a lot of questions about with that. That's a whole other
Yeah.
as a wannabe photographer. That's a whole nother question. But yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I wondered, I know they used cell phones because there were a couple of scenes where they called each other or, were trying to reach someone. So it did give it a throwback feel,
Mm,
kind of, to me. Um, and it allowed the director or whoever to focus in on specific uh, scenes that they wanted to, give a cameo to or highlight. Um, and I started thinking that about two-thirds of the way through, but I'm not sure if it fulfilled what they were trying to do in that regard because I didn't quite feel maybe what I was supposed to feel by those, picture frame type moments.
yeah,
Um, because there's just so much going on at the same time.
yeah,
Yeah. So, so that one I'll think on a bit more. Um, but it's almost like it's a throwback to, World War II in a
yeah,
way, or Korea, or, maybe Vietnam too.
yeah.
Just where this is all they've got and they're going to capture this story. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was interesting that because Kirsten Dunst's camera shoots video too. That's why it was. I know Lee's camera shoots video, but the other one was using film and a film
Mm,
camera and develops in black and white film, and that's why I think, especially in the last scene where they're raiding the White House and there's these black and white captures.
yeah.
If we didn't witness the White House being raided and you just saw the photographs, would it have the same impact on you? And I wonder if
Yeah.
that's because we're so used to video that we're so used to
Right.
everything being, you know, um, that if we've kind of lost sight of the power of
Of a photo.
photographs. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. And I thought that may be a message they're trying to convey. And the absence of something actually can also be part of the story because we're subconsciously looking for that. And I was subconsciously looking for average citizens to be following the soldiers into the White House with their phones, in
yeah,
front of them because I'm sure, I mean, that happens already just
yeah,
during moments of crisis. So sometimes the lack of something can weigh on us too,
mhm,
in a story. So those are all the reasons. I mean, those are some of the reasons I did like it. It made me think um, about it. I thought, it was kind of interesting that Sammy and Lee were both mentors in a way.
mhm.
Like Sammy in a way was a mentor to Joel, and Lee definitely was a mentor to Jesse. Um, and yeah, and that's where I come in with thinking I would have liked to have a little more depth or flashback into Sammy's life and how Jesse um, just seemed to be alone, you know.
Mhm.
Um, so, but maybe we don't need to know that. But I wanted to know that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I did wonder how she shot, how Jesse was shooting black and white film in that situation, to run
yeah,
in to run and gun and to be shooting those photos and having to. I think the difficulty of doing that, to have to adjust all the settings in that situation, must be. I guess it was must be tough to do that. You wonder how all these great photographs have been taken over the years
yeah.
to have to adjust on the fly like that. But towards the end, when Lee is killed, I kind
Hmm.
of, I don't know, did it have an impact that maybe, because I guess she was almost in a way it was passing the torch to Jesse, but I kind of wonder why that decision was made to have her die the way
Have her
she did.
killed. Yeah, that's again partly about the depth. Um, I had a hard time feeling loss when Lee was killed.
Yeah.
Um, it did, I think the idea of, like you say, passing the torch was so obvious. It was like, okay, well, now Jesse's become who Lee used to be. And actually, she was kind of losing it
Hmm.
toward the end too. It's like she had finally become shell shocked, as they say. Um, so yeah, that didn't quite go over with me emotionally.
Yeah.
And none of this is the actor's fault. I see it more as a writing thing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought all the performances are really good. I do think that I know that the locations were pretty limited. I think that was probably a budget thing where there was very few locations, and locations that there were pretty nondescript. I mean, it was pretty, I think the last scene was probably the most expensive part of the movie with all the different people and all the action. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I did. I think you mentioned the top of it that the characters weren't fully developed enough to really
Mm-hmm.
have her death really have that emotional I mean, you almost saw it coming. You kind of felt like she was gonna. This was her last hurrah in some ways, but she didn't seem to be at a point where she was. I don't know. It just I don't know. It didn't really have the impact that I don't think they were. I don't think it had the impact that they were going for.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. So, and I wonder, the writer director, Alex Garland, um, is from England. Doesn't mean he can't write about American Civil War.
Yeah.
Um, I wonder how that maybe lack of cultural insight, I don't know, did that play into how the characters were drawn?
Hmm.
Um, so But, now I want to read one of his other books. There's a book called, I think, The Beach that he's written too,
Hmm.
that sounds kind of interesting. Um, Kind of like a search for Shangri-La.
Hmm.
Uh,
Hmm.
I'm not sure how it ends though, so um,
We'll
could
have to see.
could turn horrible. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah.
Um,
I really liked his other films. There's a few other films that he's done that I thought were really,
mhm.
really good. But
Yeah.
yeah, I, and I do like I mentioned, I do appreciate the fact that he kind of rode the line.
Hmm.
I was very careful to not cross it and
Yeah.
to not pick a side, but at the same time, would it have had more emotional impact if there was a side to root for or against?
Right. Or, even a character to root for.
Hmm.
Because at a certain point, you're not, um, that's what I was looking for. I want to root for a character, even if they're doing objectionable things. Okay, they can be, just out for the story. They can lack empathy or whatever, but at the same time, we still need to somehow empathize. And one scene, now I remember, the reason I thought Joel was with um, well, actually, I get it now. Okay. First, I thought Joel was with the rebels because he was friends with some of the soldiers because they
Mhm.
were talking together. And I looked up one of the soldiers' names, which was, what was her name? Maybe Ani or Anya, I think it was. The character's name was Anya, but they exchanged a few words and then she had to get on the truck and leave.
Mhm.
So he was following her, but then they're the ones that invaded the Capitol. And when they did that, that's when I started thinking, well, maybe he's actually against them doing this and he's worried about it. So I don't know. But
Yeah.
now maybe he was just, all of them interact with the people that can help them get to their goal,
Mm.
not necessarily emotionally attached to any of them.
Yeah, almost like they as a group would use people for their own ends. Even in
Yeah,
this situation, they wanted the story, they wanted the picture, they wanted the quote,
yeah,
and everything. I think there was a almost like a disconnect there of, like we mentioned, like they were just being observers and they didn't have a connection to the people. They were just there observing, and they
yeah,
would use their, like when they're at the gas station, there's people hanging or there were people being tortured and about to be killed. They still had that. I guess you have to have that disconnect to be in those situations and to report, as in a neutral way on
mhm,
these horrible things that are happening. You almost have to have, you can't have this attachment or have humanity in some ways, because you have to
yeah,
be there to report and not interfere with or not change the course of whatever it is that's happening.
yeah, yeah. Um, and that scene, um, I thought it was interesting when they started taking the guy's picture with the people hanging, because I would have thought, well, I guess it was an indicator of how far down civilization had broken down if he didn't even care if his picture was being taken,
Yeah.
you know? So, and then that scene with their friends pulling up in the truck, I, I still don't know what to think. The one part that made me think that seems out of character is when Jessie jumped into the other car without her camera,
Yeah.
you know? And I thought, I could, I guess I could believe her doing that, but only if she took her camera with her because she's still out for the story. I mean, she's still trying to prove herself. Um,
Yeah, that's probably my least favorite scene of the film. I think it was just a way to separate the group and to have the
yeah,
scene later where we have them being executed.
yeah,
The scene with, oh, where are you from? What America are you from?
yeah,
I think that was kind of just to separate the group. That whole thing was really silly.
yeah,
Those characters come and then they both get killed shortly after, and it
yeah,
seems like a very careless thing to do, knowing, they just see some people hanging in a gas station being tortured and probably going to be killed, and like, let's speed down the road and let's jump in different. And I guess that's a way for them to kind of let loose, and maybe they do feel like they're just reporting and that they are not affected by things, but it seemed really out of character for them to do that, something so careless, when they've been so
yeah,
careful the rest of the time.
yeah. And even that I felt like that was kind of like breaking the third wall, as they say. Um, because the scene where the two guys get killed is the only one where some kind of ideology comes in, which is, anti immigrant. you know.
Yeah, it's true.
And when he asked they shot the first guy, and when they asked the next guy, "Where are you from?" I'm like, "Please do not say where you're from." And then he's like, "Hong Kong." I'm like, "Oh no,"
Oh no. Yeah.
Um, but I thought that was where they kind of broke that uh, whatever it was, that sense of focusing on the violence over an ideology, you
Yeah.
know. Um, because who knows? I mean, does that mean that there's another side that's pro-immigrant now, that we haven't noticed in the story? So it's just, I thought that scene just didn't quite fit, maybe, with what he was
And
trying to do.
yeah, and the way that they dispatched the soldiers was really goofy too.
Mhm.
They're going to hear a big vehicle speeding towards them. I mean, it just seemed
Yeah.
really out of place. And I guess it was, Sammy had his moment, but it seemed a little, if everything's so grounded and so kind of gritty, and then it goes to the soldier won't hear a truck speeding on a gravel road.
Mhm.
I don't know. I
Right.
mean, I don't want to be nitpicky, but it seemed a little inconsistent.
Yeah, that and well, we're talking about inconsistencies because I have another one. Okay, so there are military bases in California, Texas, and Florida, but there is massive security up there in the Northeast. And for suddenly DC to have fallen because folks from, you know, militias or whoever from Texas, Florida, and California have somehow broken through. It just, I had to suspend a lot of disbelief
Yeah.
on that. Um, so, looking for the planes, where are all the planes and the, you know, Air Force and Navy and all that.
Yeah.
Um, so, but I would have found believable more, if it were set closer to those parts of the country. I think, there's there's potential for good stories to be told in a scenario like that.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah. I think because we do come in towards the end of the conflict, and we get very little history on what
yeah,
caused it, what's led up to these events. At the beginning, when the president is saying the propaganda, you get the propaganda angle of, oh, it's a decisive victory and it's the greatest victory of all, ever, whatever. That
yeah,
other than that, we don't really have history. We don't have any really context on what's happened before. We're just kind of thrown in to this conflict, and we don't have really major events leading up to this point. It's just kind of, here it is. And I think that kind of hurt the investment you have in the story and the characters when you don't have, you just kind of come in the middle. And but maybe that was, again, maybe they're just trying to say that these are reporters. It doesn't
mhm,
really matter what the history is. They're just there reporting. It doesn't matter
yeah,
what's led up to this point. They're just there observing. So I don't know. Maybe.
yeah. And that coming back to around to why I did like it. I liked the dystopian vibe
Hmm.
of these characters just in the middle of this chaos, uh, as far as we can tell, it's basically just chaos at that point. And, but with, you know, their own personal goals, their own obsessions. That's it. Obsession in the midst of dystopia. I, uh, So, and then,
Yeah.
right at the end, the twist with Joel saying, I need a quote. I was just like, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. I kept hoping till the end somebody would show their cards but their cards were that they just didn't, they didn't have a side except their own side
Yeah.
and their own goals. Yeah.
I guess are they in a sense, or are we supposed to? Because if they are, they're just observing. Is it to make it to kind of explore what reporters are there for, what journalists are there to do, or is it more to kind of would you have more of an investment in the characters if they had a goal or they had some kind of motivation for one side or another? Would that would have changed the story? I mean, I don't know. I guess they're neutral, but
There was the main issue. It works as like this thematic, um, you know, thought exercise. I don't know if that's the best way to say it. Um, but in each case, each scene, it stops before it gets into something externally meaningful. Like they are not turning in their photos to anyone that we can tell. There's no engagement with editors or, publications on, yes, we can print this, but not this.
hmm,
Um, so, which would also have made it interesting
yeah,
to me in that way of, so we're really left with this sense of, we don't have any of that ideology or moralizing, except maybe where they shot the two guys.
yeah,
Um, so, but
yeah.
that, yeah.
I mean, because I know they made I know there was a scene at the beginning where they're at their hotel and the generator is going off, or they had to they're going to lose power, and they talk about uploading their pictures, but
Hmm.
we don't ever really get a sense of who is seeing these pictures, where are they being sent, how are they being distributed, who's receiving them, who's following them, and I
Yeah,
guess I think what kind of I think what leads to these questions is in a world of social media when everyone is recording every aspect of their lives, or most people are, um, to not have to just never that really not be explored too much on where are they who are they reporting where are these pictures going, who who's watching, because if the
yeah.
people at the dress shop are so oblivious willfully oblivious to what's going on, then who's who's following it, who's absorbing this stuff.
That's interesting you brought up that scene now, because in a sense, she was telling him, what you're doing doesn't matter to me,
Yeah,
you know? Um, so there's a lot of good philosophizing we can do on this. Um, and so yeah, it's like the lack is maybe the lack is intentional in this situation. So we
hmm,
just feel the dystopia of it all.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Maybe we're thinking too much, but
Yeah.
yeah, and I wonder too where Jesse's getting a film from, because that must be hard to come by in dystopian America. I mean, even now it's hard to come by sometimes. So
That's
it,
right.
it's wonder where she's getting film from, and you have to be really deliberate with film, and in a
Yeah.
war zone, it must be tough. But
Yeah. So, and that's why I wondered about the era, because, or if we could even attach an era to what we were seeing,
hmm,
because just using the photography already took me back to, this is not a current situation,
hmm,
although they had cell phones and laptops, so I don't know. It kind of,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, because I think part of it was you know it was almost another to not have the internet or social media really mentioned at all. I think that was part of the way to make it feel more dystopian, because I think if you had um like they're posting pictures on Instagram, I think you'd have it wouldn't feel as dystopian as it would if just there is no uh that don't exist. It's I think that added to the feeling of things have really gone sideways. That, you know, the life that we know now isn't the life that they're living with
right. And
limited resources.
the lack of external engagement at all.
Hmm.
Pardon me. So it's almost reminding me of the blackout that's going on in Europe right now,
Yeah, yeah,
where everybody, they don't have their cell phones right now, or all of that to be doing these things. So um, it seems like they had power at different stops they were at in the movie. But yeah, um, so just today's a timely incident that just makes you think that, yeah, you'd be thrown back on your resources. Um, so,
but no, I do like the dystopian feel of it. I think it did a pretty good job. I think the limited amount of locations added to that too. I think having it
mhm,
be more of the kind of an open, the travel in the country, the road trip aspect of it. I think that was a great way to explore different parts of the country, and you can see different ways that everyone's reacting to the conflict, and
right,
to give you more of a um, the hazards and the dangers along the way of just having a road trip in this kind of situation. So I really do like that part of the film. I thought they did a good job, kind of make really having you making you feel uncomfortable, and that there's you can't really even stop for gas without wondering if you're going to be tortured and killed.
right. Yeah, that was creepy,
Yeah,
that part. Yeah.
yeah.
So,
Deliverance country, I think. Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Um, Made me think of some gas stations I've passed on by myself when
Oh yeah, they're out there.
when
Yeah,
driving across country.
yeah. You got to be careful of
That was relatable.
some places. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. And just to think that if this kind of situation happened, this conflict happened, those people would be much more emboldened to act on uh, their desires because they feel like they can. So
Right.
it'd be even scarier because they had no, like you mentioned, they brought them down and we're kind of showing off like, you want to see what we did. So I think
Yeah.
they wouldn't be afraid to act out on their impulses in that
Right.
situation.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. So overall, I thought it was good. Maybe just a little bit of disconnect uh, from our usual expectations. Um, but I hesitate to say it it wasn't good. I think it was good
Mhm.
um, in a very focused way. So
Yeah,
it's not your typical film where you're going to get all the, emotional stuff going on, you
yeah,
know. But it does drive home some good points that I think we need to think about.
yeah.
So,
Yeah, I do. I
yeah.
think it was good too. I enjoyed it. I was a little bit disappointed with it. I don't know what I was
Mhm.
expecting, but I'm glad because I knew going in that they didn't really want to portray one side or another as good or evil, and I like that about it. But I don't know. I wasn't really expecting more action. I think there was more action than I expected.
Yeah.
Really not until the end. But yeah, there's some of it just felt a little thin. I think they tried to do a lot of different things, and it just seemed a little bit more character development, maybe, or maybe more investment, or maybe a little bit more context in what the conflict was. Not to choose a right or wrong, just maybe just major events or battles that have taken place, and say this is why we're here. But yeah,
Yeah.
it was good. I liked it. I felt like I feel like there's more stories to be told
Yeah.
in this with this setup.
Thin is a good word. Um, I agree with that, and I've just thought as we've been discussing this, it's almost like now in that there is a lot of violence in society right now, and sometimes you can't make head nor tail of what's going on. I mean, you wake up and you hear, okay, something's happened in a nightclub somewhere, and something's happened at a festival somewhere, you
Hmm.
know, and then you've got your daily life to, put out fires with that. So I think it's kind of relatable on that level too.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So
It was thought. I think it was thought provoking too. I do like that they gave some attention to photographers and photojournalism. I think
yeah,
that was nice to see that because you don't really see that much anymore.
yeah. And I love photography. We have a gallery nearby that um, sometimes, you know, uh, does a feature on photography, different local photographers, and always fascinating. I'll take my students there. Sometimes we'll do writing projects in response to the photographs. It's always kind of interesting. It's an
Oh,
art.
that's cool. It
It
is.
is an
Yeah.
art.
It
So
must be tough in these kind of situations to take. If you unless I know that Jessie mentioned having to adjust her camera settings and to do it on the fly like that, giving me a little bit more appreciation for photographers through the years to be able to report on these things and to take
yeah,
these photographs in these really terrible situations, and to have the knowledge and the skill to adjust their their different capture settings on film. I mean, it's pretty amazing if you think about it. The images that we have through the years on these
yeah.
kind of situations.
It must need to like just become part of instinct,
Yeah,
to do it. So Um, yeah, so overall, I'd say maybe a 4, I'd give it.
out of 10, really?
No, no.
Oh,
Oh, that's funny. I was thinking 4
oh,
out of 5. I'm so
oh,
used to
gotcha.
Goodreads.
Okay,
Oh,
yeah,
no, I'd say 7 or 8 out of 10.
yeah. That's where
It
about I
gives
am.
you
Yeah,
something to think about. Um, there's some things missing.
yeah.
Yeah.
I like the cinematography. I like the. I mean, I think it was well crafted. It was well
Hmm.
done. I just think a little bit more meat on the bone, I think, would have made it a little bit more impactful. But I like what they were trying to do, and yeah, I think I'm about a 70% or so. A good movie. I
Hmm.
enjoyed it,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. Me
kind of
too.
a few things I wish were a little bit better. But I know we just spent the last 40 minutes a little, kind of picking on things. But I think like overall, it was a good movie.
Yeah. No,
Yeah,
I think so too.
yeah.
So, and I've just noticed, I thought back to when, the two Game of Thrones producers and how they were going to film some kind of Civil War related
Oh yeah,
series that got a lot of pushback. So it just seems like this is becoming a theme,
yeah,
different interpretations of what that means. But I'm much happier having watched this one. I really don't know what they would have come up with, and I probably wouldn't have wanted to see that one. So I think this was a much better philosophical take on uh, current, not current political events, but sort of our current immersion in uh, just the violence in regular society.
yeah. That's a good
Yeah,
point. Yeah, it was fun. Thank you for taking time.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For anyone who wants to connect with you, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at elgoshi and also on Instagram. And I finally set up my website
Oh,
at
cool.
laylaosmigoshi.com.
Awesome.
So there now too.
Cool.
Yeah.
And I'll add those links to the description below.
Okay. All
Awesome.
right.
Yeah, looking forward to the next time. We'll have to choose another one.
Yeah, I'd love
Yeah,
to. Yeah.
yeah, good stuff. Thanks again,
Okay.
and thanks everyone for listening. Talk to you soon.
Thanks.